Hi, Alex. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our Zoom meeting tonight. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes so people can sign on. I don't see any incoming logons anymore, so let's just get started. Good evening, everyone, to the overview webinar for the mobile home rent stabilization. Tonight, I'm going to give an overview of all the specific items in the MHRSO, as we call it. And I just want to put a disclaimer there that we cannot offer legal advice, but we love to educate the residents of the MHRSO and answer your questions if at all possible. Yeah, also not financial advice. The webinar works as follows. We will give a presentation and you can use the Q&A icon to type in a question. You can do the raise hand icon, or if you're on the phone, you can dial *9. And we can answer questions after each section or at the end of the webinar. You can if you would like to ask a question of a certain subsection, feel free to kind of raise your hands or put a comment in the chat. So tonight we're going to go into what is the MHRSO, what is rent and base rent, definitions that are used in the MHRSO, what are allowed rent increases, what has been determined with regards to vacancy control and decontrol, a little bit about the petition process, and about the eviction protections for tenants. So what is the MHRSO? Again, the MHRSO is short for the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance. And this ordinance was adopted by the City Council to protect the mobile home community by stabilizing rents, providing eviction protections, and ensuring a fair rate of return for the park owners / landlords. The effective date of this ordinance was October 28, 2021. So who is covered under this ordinance? Both mobile home owners and mobile home renters are covered. A mobile home owner in the MHRSO is defined as a mobile home owner who owns the mobile home and rents the mobile home space, including communal facilities and housing services, from a mobile home park owner. And a mobile home renter rents a mobile home for occupancy in a mobile home park, and including the communal facilities and housing services, from a mobile home landlord. In the majority, or I say maybe currently 100% of the cases, the mobile home landlord is the mobile home park owner, because the mobile home park owner rents out these mobile homes to renters. But in some parks, it might happen that an owner of a mobile home is renting out his mobile home to a tenant. That's why we're making the distinction here. There are some exemptions for the coverage under the MHRSO. One of them is that if the mobile home resident has a lease in effect for a duration over 12 months, this exemption is phasing out and it will be completely abandoned by 2025. Another exemption is that a mobile home is not used as a primary residence. Examples given are if this is a second home, a vacation home. I don't think that applies too much in the mobile homes here in Mountain View. A third exemption was stricken from the ordinance in a later decision by the City Council with regards to an MOU or a separate agreement between the park owner and the park residents. This is no longer an exemption in the MHRSO. So what is considered rent under the MHRSO? It's periodic payments for the use of a mobile home space or the occupancy of a mobile home and any communal facilities and housing services. Not included are incidental charges, separately billed utility fees, or local government fees and charges. Then the MHRSO also uses the term base rent, and base rent is considered the rent that is in effect on March 16, 2021. It's an important date to remember if you moved in on or before that date. Otherwise, base rent is the initial rent at the date of move-in if you moved in after March 16, 2021. The MHRSO also stipulates that the rent needs to be rolled back if you have been confronted with a rent increase since from March 16, 2021 until September 1, 2022. So on October 28, 2021, when this ordinance became effective, only the base rent could be charged and no AGA rent increases were allowed until this past September 1, 2022. A simple example is you got a rent increase on January 1, 2021. You paid $1,200. Your rent was still $1,200 on March 16, 2021. And on October 28, 2021, you had received no rent increases since March 16, 2021, so no overcharge rent needed to be paid back. In example 2, this is a different case. You did have a base rent of $1,200 on March 16, 2021, but you received a rent increase in June of 2021 of $100. Come October 28, that increase was no longer allowed and the overcharged rent of $100 needs to be paid back from the June 1 date onwards. If you have any questions with regards to the base rent and the rent rollback, feel free to contact our office and we will look in your specific situation and try to clear any confusion up. Rent increases are allowed under the MHRSO and one annual general adjustment of rent increase is allowed. We call that the AGA, annual general adjustment of rent. And that is 100% of the CPI of this local Bay Area. And the rent increase, first rent increase is allowed to be given on September 1, 2022. And for this year, the Rental Housing Committee determined that increase to be 5%. The CPI was actually higher, but because there is a cap in the ordinance of 5%, the AGA was set at 5%. Rent increases can only also be given through a banked rent increase for mobile homes that might or might not come into effect next year. In case a park owner has not given you a rent increase of the 5%, which was allowable from September 1, 2022 onwards, next year, when the new AGA has been determined, and it's September 2023, he is allowed to add the 5% of this year that he did not charge to the tenant to the then AGA, but the total rent increase could never be higher than 10%. A third way of getting a rent increase for the landlord is to file a petition request for an upward adjustment of rent through the MNOI procedure, which we call it's a maintenance of net operating income petition. A second petition is a capital improvement petition, and we will go dive deeper into that in a minute. Then the topic of vacancy control and decontrol, not similar to the CSFRA, the MHRSO is allowing for vacancy control upon the start of a new tenancy of the space. The limitations are that if a new mobile home residents start renting a space, the space rent can be increased with 100% CPI, which this year is 5%, unless there was a legal termination in compliance with the MRL, or there was an abandonment of the mobile home, or there was a commercial purchaser that replaces the mobile home. For mobile home tenants, there is vacancy decontrol, which means that a landlord can set the initial rent at market rate, similarly to the CSFRA. Now I would like to go a little bit deeper into the petition process. The petition process is set up to give due process to both tenants and the landlord to be able to ask for rent increases or rent decreases in certain circumstances. It initiates a request for an individual adjustment of rent. It explains and documents the basis for a rent adjustment as requested by the petitioner, and it establishes a fair and transparent procedure. And it notifies all the parties of a pending petition and allows all parties to participate in the process. Here's an overview what type of petitions can be filed in the MHRSO. So on the one hand, we have the petitions for downward adjustment of rent, and this can be done in case there was rent charged in excess of a lawful rent, such as maybe not rolling back the rent when it was demanded, or rent increases that go over the AGA. Failure to maintain habitability have to do with habitability issues and or reduction of communal facilities or housing services. And then the fourth petition can be filed for undue hardship in certain situations. One of them is when a capital improvement petition is filed, and the second is when a banked increase is given to a tenant. The tenant can file an undue hardship in certain circumstances. On the other side, we have the petition for upward adjustment of rent. That is when a landlord / park owner is unable to receive a fair return on its investment. And as I just mentioned, we adopted the MNOI standard, the maintenance of net operating income. And the second petition that a landlord can file is for capital improvement under certain circumstances. The capital improvement petitions are specifically detailed in the MHRSO, and the following criteria have been included. For a capital improvement petition to be approved, it needs to at least primarily benefit the mobile home resident. It needs to be a functional improvement. This to kind of contradict over improvements. It has to have a life expectancy of 5 years plus, and it's necessary to bring the property into compliance or maintain compliance with applicable building or housing codes. What is not allowed under capital improvements is routine maintenance and repair, the cost of maintenance and repair as opposed to replacement cost due to a failure to maintain, and the maintenance of improvements to communal facilities and over improvements. Here are some more of the basics of a capital improvement petition. The length of the increase, the increased parameters, and the tenant hardship petitions, as I just mentioned. So the specified capital improvements are part by this fair rate of return concept that is included in the MHRSO. And if a capital improvement is allowed by a hearing officer, it's considered a temporary adjustment to the tenant's amounts to be paid to recover certain capital costs, and it ends at the end of an amortization period or at vacancy decontrol, and it is not considered rent as defined in the MHRSO. This is a typo, and that means that it is not subject to the annual AGA. Then the tenant hardship petitions are allowed when a capital improvement petition is submitted. This gives you a little overview of what type of rental properties there are in Mountain View. And for the MHRSO, all the capital improvement costs are 50% split between a tenant and a landlord. As you can see, this gives an overview of the rental properties in Mountain View. These are the apartment complexes. As mentioned, if a capital improvement is approved, the costs need to be amortized. The pass-through can only be for maximum 50% of the cost. So the mobile homes fall in the third bracket, and the pass-through is not considered rent, and it's limited to 5% of each tenant's base rent. That was a lot. Feel free to ask questions. We haven't had a capital improvement petition yet, so we know the conditions. We have just developed the forms. As we've seen with the CSFRA, while we are receiving and handling petitions, we always find things to improve on. So we are just foreseeing that that might be the case for MHRSO capital improvement petitions as well. So then we are going over the eviction protections. And the eviction protections for mobile home owners is found in the MRL, the mobile home law, the MRL, mobile. Come on, Alex, help me here. I forgot what the name is.
Mobile home residency law.
There you go, mobile home residency law. My brain is somewhere else tonight. For mobile home owners, there are limitations for the grounds upon which a park owner can evict a mobile home residence. And one of them is a failure to pay rent, a violation of park rules and regulations, a substantial annoyance, of course, that is quite vague, non-compliance with state or local laws and regulations regarding mobile homes, a condemnation of the park, and a changed use of the park. So the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance equally provides eviction protections for mobile home tenants, because mobile home tenants are not covered in the mobile home residency law. So the mobile home tenants get similar protections as provided in the CSFRA for apartment units, and can only be evicted for failure to pay rent, breach of a lease, a nuisance, equally vague, criminal activity, a failure to give access, repairs or temporary vacancies, owner move-in, withdrawal from the rental market, and demolition. And just like in the CSFRA for mobile home tenants, the landlord / park owner first needs to give a notice to cease for the 1 asterisk just causes before they can give a termination notice. A notice to cease allows the tenants to address the issue before a termination notice can be issued. And the landlord just causes like the temporary vacancies, the owner move-in, the withdrawal from the rental market, and demolition. They may require tenant relocation assistance. So I want to let everybody know that there is now a complaint procedure, and it's called the Mobile Home Residency Law Protection Program. It sounds almost like a secret program, secret hiding program, but anyone can submit a complaint for an alleged violation of the mobile home residency law. And these complaints go to the Housing and Community Department of the state of California. Here are some legal resources that are available in case you have questions. We prefer you always come and contact us first so we can help you in if any way possible and refer you to the correct organization if further referral is needed. Every other Thursday, we have a housing and eviction help center in the library, and the first and third Thursdays of the month between 1 and 5 p.m. And it's not just help with rent stabilization, but we have affordable housing information. We can help with mediation services. We have food distribution, diaper distribution, and other family services as well on hand. And here is our contact information: email, phone, website. On the website mountainview.gov/mobile-homes, you can find specific information related to the MHRSO. You will find all kinds of forms for tenants and landlords, and also the regulations that have been adopted by the Rental Housing Committee, as well as the text of the MHRSO. Any questions? Let's see. Capital improvements.
All right, yeah, so we do have a question about capital improvements. And the question is, increasing the 50 AMP limit on electrical panels on mobile homes is becoming an issue because many consumers are considering buying electric vehicles. But such an improvement depends on the age of the mobile home. Many of the newer homes already have 100 amp panels. Could owners of the mobile home be required to pay the whole cost? Would the landlord pay for it, or would the cost be shared?
That's a good question. So first of all, if the park owner would submit a capital improvement petition to the Rental Housing Committee, and the hearing officer will evaluate all the reasons and check the eligibility criteria. But the cost is 50-50 shared, but then the 50% of the cost that can be passed through to the tenants needs to be amortized in such a way that the tenant never pays more than 5% of your base rent on top of that. So it's it's kind of a mad calculation. What will be your monthly cost as a tenant if the hearing officer approves the capital cost that is submitted? Does that answer your question?
Could the homeowner file a petition instead of having the landlord file it?
Well, I mean, okay, so the petition is meant to increase the rent. So who do you like to charge the rent to as a homeowner? So if you file, if you as an individual, I see the question. If you as an individual homeowner decide to put an improvement on your mobile home, that is a decision made by you and not by the landlord / park owner. If you want to reach an agreement with the park owner about sharing the costs and improving and increasing the rent because of an improvement on your mobile home space, that is also a possibility. That is called a shared petition, a joint petition. And that needs to be initiated by the homeowner / space tenant. I did not even mention the joint petitions yet. Yeah? Okay, good.
All right, any other questions? You can also raise your hand if you would like to speak, or if you're joining us by phone, you can dial *9. Otherwise, we have both the Q&A box or the chat open. All right, I see a hand by Joan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm curious about the guaranteed, tell me what it is that is guaranteed to the owner. I understood originally that it was the very, very bottom line, the final profit on the operation that had to be the same as it was a couple of years ago. And the way you said it, it was operating expenses. And I don't know enough about accounting to know if there's a difference.
Yeah, so maintenance of net operating income is the methodology that is used to determine whether or not a park owner gets a fair return on their investment. So what we do is we take the base year, which is 2021, and we look at the net operating income of the landlord. And then in the year that he files a petition that he wants to increase the rents because he feels he has no fair return on income anymore, say in 2023, he files that petition, the hearing officer is now going to compare his 2021 net operating income with his 2023 net operating income. And that net operating income should be able to have increased with the percentage of the CPI. For instance, if over 2 years, the total CPI was increased by 10%, he should be able to have a 10% higher net operating income in 2023 as he had in 2021. If that percentage is under the 10%, the hearing officer might be able to give him, allow him to have a higher rent increase, and he will calculate exactly how much that would be. If his net operating income increased with more than the 10%, and these are just hypothetical numbers, right? It's not really 10%. But if it's more than 10%, then he's not allowed an additional rent increase.
My question is, I don't understand if net operating income is the bottom line when you make an expense sheet, when you make the, what do you call it? When you
Okay, a net operating is so in the regulations, it is exactly stipulated what you can and cannot put as costs versus the income that you have. So certain costs are allowed to be in that cost sheet and other costs are not allowed. And they are all very specifically mentioned in the regulations. I don't know the whole list by heart. And we developed a form with all these line items in there. So all they need to do is fill out those costs. And the hearing officer checks if all these costs are allowable costs or non-allowable costs, and he will deduct any unallowable costs. And then on the other side as the income, and that constitutes the net operating income.
Oh, thank you. That, yeah, that makes it understandable.
Okay, so we have another question asking, how many times can they shut off the water before it counts as a decrease in services?
How many times? It's not about how many times, it's about does it interfere with your rental rights? For instance, if they mention to you that the water needs to be shut off from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, that interferes with you being able to do certain things, such as taking a shower, boiling water, just using water throughout the day. So that already interferes with your daily use. So if the water is shut off for half an hour, and ultimately it's up to the hearing officer to decide what a reduction in services is, but these are just some examples of things that he needs to consider.
Perfect. All right, do we have any other questions? Again, you can go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A. You can also use the chat if you're more comfortable using the chat, or you can raise your hand. It doesn't look like we have anyone on the phone, but if you are on the phone, you can dial *9 and we'll patch you through.
So in the meantime, while you think of your next question, I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm planning on having in-person meetings in each of the mobile home parks to go over the basics of the MHRSO, hopefully to create more awareness among all the mobile home parks.
All right, I don't see any other questions. Yep, no questions on our end. And I did leave our contact information up on the screen, just in case anyone wants to write that down or take a picture of it on your phone. But we will be emailing a copy of the presentation and a recording of the presentation to everybody who has registered this evening.
I also wanted to check in if you guys received the newsletter. I think we sent them out late last week. They may or may not still be in the post office. Just checking if you guys received them already.
Yep, we have a hand. All right, go ahead, Joan.
Yeah, I haven't received it yet.
Okay, then they should be coming very soon.
Right, Alex hasn't seen
Okay,
it either.
no, they just got in the mail, so you should be receiving it later this week, probably. Looking forward to seeing you in the help center, on the phone, by email. Please feel free to contact us anytime.
Joan, did you have one last thing? I saw your hand go back up. No? Maybe not.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Andrea and I wish you a happy rest of the evening.
Goodbye.
Bye.